Yo, and what's going on, everybody? It is the DLF mailbag fellas here back again in order to answer some of your Dynasty questions. We appreciate all of the comments that we received on the video so far. Hopefully, if you've got any more questions, we've gotten a few folks like hitting us up on Twitter. Definitely come and hit us up. You see our respective Twitter handles underneath our names right here, or our faces rather. But come hit us up, DM us, shoot us a question if you have any more problems or issues, or even just trade questions that you might have. We'd be happy to evaluate them on the show, or give you some quick tips via DMs and whatnot. But always, if you can, drop us a link at the Dynasty League Football URL that's down below. Always feel free to drop us comments in the video itself, and we'll try and get back to you as quick as we can there. I think the easiest one is to just come yell at us on Twitter. I've had a couple of folks to just tag us on Twitter, or shoot me a DM or whatever over the last week. And actually, one of those questions we'll answer at some point on the show today. But hopping right on into it, strategy piece, since we normally like to do the strategy or banter portion of the show at the very front. And one of the questions, what's the value of stacking in Dynasty? Would somebody, or would you recommend trying to move up in order to do some sort of stack? So something in this person's case, say Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill stack, which would probably be one of the most popular stacks coming into the 2020 season. But that's for redraft or for seasonal, probably for DFS at some point as well. Mm-hmm. Would you do the same thing for Dynasty? Adam, what are you thinking?
Bravo for this question. I mean, I've been racking my brain on it all day. It's a tough question to answer. I'll answer simply and say, if it works out, sure, absolutely. I would love to have a stack that's locked up for 3 years, that's at the top of their game. But when we looked into it a little bit more, so ADP wise, that's not going to work. So if the question pertains to startup, something of that caliber is not really going to work. We tried Kyler and Nook, that's not going to work. If you're talking trading for those two guys in a super flex is going to be so pricey that it's probably going to be quite detrimental to your roster. Mm-hmm. But we looked into it, and there are a few stacks that would be conducive to value, basically. One of them was Baker and OBJ. You could go OBJ in the 4th and Baker in the 5th in Superflex right now, and I think those are both value picks. And you and I talked about using stacking as a tiebreaker, perhaps. I've been talking all offseason about that big tier, Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay, A.J. Brown, guys like that. Well, OBJ's in that tier for me, and where I had been drafting Allen Robinson recently, that would break a tie for me if I could go OBJ if I needed a quarterback in, the 5th, and I've got to pick, a late 4th round pick and an early 5th round pick. That might break the tie for me. Let me grab OBJ here and hope to get Baker on the turn. If I don't get Baker at the end of the turn, well, I valued Allen Robinson and OBJ similarly anyways. So there's a situation there that just we had to really rack our brain on it and try to figure out, yeah, that's cool. When could it work? And for trading, you can look. I mean, Zach Ertz in tight end premium has he's gotten a lot cheaper in tight end premium. So I might stack Wentz with Ertz. That's something. Or we also discussed picking offenses that have very defined target percentages, like something like stacking Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers is another possibility, just because Adams might be the only wide receiver to see 30% this year, and he's on contract. You don't know if Rodgers is going to get replaced soon by Love, so that's why it's always going to be dicey in Dynasty. Just so many things change, and you're stuck with these guys, at least stuck with the value they hold.
Yeah, and just kind of playing with it a bit and just looking at ADP, and just to give y'all a sense of what we're talking about here. So I just put together just this one quick one to try and figure out, okay, so you go through and you draft Patrick Mahomes at ADP. And then we're thinking that Tyreek Hill, on average, from his positional cost, he's going to go what? Late 1st, early 2nd, somewhere in there.
14 overall right now.
Yeah, 14 overall. So if you're picking at the back end of the 2nd round, and I'm thinking somebody with an ADP 24, 26, so that's about where AJ Brown might go. That's what you're looking at in terms of having to actually make that move in order to go from a person in AJ Brown's area all the way up to what you would need to pay for Tyreek Hill, which would, at the very minimum, you're probably paying at least a first. And that's just looking at with a specific name. Now, if you were to now move around and look at different folks that might go along the same tier, the values might change. But the thing that I keep coming back to is the fact that, I mean, most likely a 2021 first is probably going to be somewhere in the deal. It's either that or it's going to be a veteran of some significant value. And to me, the thing that I think about the most when it comes to stacking is that you're capturing those points for the current season. So if we're stacking in our current startups, that's stacking for the 2020 season. But there's nothing to say that stacking is something that correlates year over year. There's nothing that says that, or at least I'm yet to see the data that says that, that stack is going to continue to hit multiple years out. I can understand wanting the security or having an understanding of wanting to be able to capture volume out of good offenses for years to come. And especially for the Chiefs, I mean, that's something that we would definitely want to do. I mean, whether it's Mahomes, Kelsey, Mahomes, Hill, Mahomes, CEH, I mean, you can do a number of different combinations. But there's nothing to say that one particular stack is going to wind up hitting. So unless you're trying to just capture the entire Chiefs offense and just get all of them, I don't see where the advantage is for your team in order to actually create that stack or go out of your way in order to generate that stack. It's just a lot of draft capital that you're going to wind up having to move in order to do that.
I actually did pretty much just that and acquired Tyreek Hill, and you dislodged it in my head while you were having that conversation when you brought up that trade, and I went back to see what I traded. I essentially traded Tua and a 2021 first for Tyreek Hill and a 16th round pick.
Okay.
So that's the type of thing that you'd have to do. Who'd I get in the 16th round? James White, or Julian Edelman. So I pretty much gave up Tua, Julian Edelman, and a 2021 first for Tyreek Hill.
I got you. And that's not to say that stacking doesn't work. I mean, I think a lot of folks, especially in the DFS community, if they dabble in that, or especially folks that are involved in like season-long leagues, they understand like the value of a stack. I mean, we're not discrediting that. It's just the stack. It's just the misnomer, or maybe the characterization rather of how that stack would actually perform like over time. Good friend and also a buddy that works over at Established to Run, Michael Leone, like he actually put together, this is actually a piece that he had done like that was specific to best ball. Invite folks to go over and take a look at it, but it looked at like what the advantage is for wide receivers when their QB hits. So you can see it was the minimum hit, like if you wind up taking their wide receiver that goes along with it, even a small hit like puts them at 11.9 points, small hit or better, 18.4, medium hit, 31.2, and then a big hit, 36 points above their ADP. Now that shows you that there is definitely an impact, and that's really at this point, that's not our argument. It's more of, is that same hit going to happen year 2, year 3? I mean, and so on and so forth, like on down the line. Yeah. So, I mean, unless that stack is going to one, it hits, 2, it hits big, and then 3, you wind up winning your championship because of it. I'm struggling to see the actual value in it, other than the fact that you wind up with good players on your team.
Yeah, let's bring it back to something actionable. I mean, we both agree it's good, right? If you do it, it's good. Don't do it to the detriment of your team.
Right.
I don't mind you adding players like Julian Edelman for essentially free, because as you mentioned, it's an in-season thing. It's like a redraft thing because it's easier to project this coming year than it is to project 3 years from now. So many things happen between now and 3 years from now. And sometimes you have players on your roster for that long in Dynasty. So it's just very difficult to predict. So no, I probably don't want to invest in very, very expensive assets or pay a hefty price to get a stack that I otherwise wouldn't be necessarily interested in that player. But if you can say, I've got this quarterback for the next 3 years and I think somebody can give me a big boost this year, or you have a buy low, like someone I'm going to talk to about later in N'Keal Harry, and you have Cam Newton. Okay, well, maybe we'll will have focused targets on N'Keal Harry, maybe Julian Edelman next year. That's something you can look at a dynasty because that player was a buy low anyways, and maybe it just kind of pushes you over to finally pulling the trigger on that trade because you have Cam Newton. Then I like it there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because at that point, you're not sacrificing capital on your team or assets like they're currently on your team in order to achieve that stack, which if it hits, that's a ton of value that you now added to your team. So like Adam mentioned earlier, I mean, if you could do a Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley stack, I mean, totally there for that. I mean, what else were we talking? You said like Carson Wentz, like Zach Ertz. Sure.
I tried to find all the reasonable ones I could think of. Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers is a possibility as well.
Yeah. You could possibly do, I mean, I don't know what folks are thinking about his long-term outlook, but if you're looking for high-end stacks, I mean, if you want to do something like Dak Amari, you could probably wind up with something like that naturally.
According to 80 currently, that would work. And then Burrow and either Boyd or AJ Green is
absolutely
a fantastic stack option for cheap right now.
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of stacks that you could just naturally accomplish anyway through through ADP and like what their values are, or even if you feel that you have to reach in order to do that stack, which again, in that piece by Leone, he actually advocates for because of the value if that stack hits is so much greater than whatever you would lose like by going ahead of their ADP. I can understand that. But again, like we were talking about earlier, using significant draft capital or significant assets to move up for it, that's where, again, I'm not entirely sure that's worthwhile because if that stack doesn't hit, then you've now used up a first-round pick in order to, or some other significant asset in order to acquire that person.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously, we want to hear what you guys think. I mean, let us know like if you approach Dynasty like with that in mind, and if you would prefer, I mean, stacking naturally versus stacking like or going out of your way in order to do that. I mean, acquiring in a trade after the startup is done, and if you try and negotiate down or something, I can understand that. But as we're talking about here, like you moving significant assets in order to do it, I'd love to hear about it. I mean, if there's an example or like your process for doing it, and if you think that it actually helps out your team, love to hear it. So definitely drop us a comment and let us know like what your approach is to stacking in Dynasty. Okay. Another strategy, yes, another strategy or debate topic, for tonight. And it's one of the age-old questions. We have this discussion, I think, almost every offseason, especially as the season's gearing up. With folks like maybe trying to do a little bit more action shortly before rosters are not necessarily locked, but again, we're more focused on the week to week versus the off season or non-point scoring season. But what are some of your biggest buys right now in Dynasty, Adam?
Yeah, I'll do wide receivers and then we can just alternate. So if you want to go over to my shared screen, scroll down from wide receiver. Of course, Juju's up there. I won't talk about Juju today. I'm going to go all the way down. I'm going to have to use the search function to find N'Keal Harry. So he's all the way down at 51. So I wanted to mention two players specifically today that you could acquire with 2021 first, but I'd also advise to try to get them for cheaper. The first one's N'Keal Harry. I think that last year was not very indicative of the 102 consensus 102 and dynasty rookie drafts last year. He was hurt. He probably shouldn't have been on IR for the entire first half of the season. They kept him on IR pretty long, and then he came back to basically get yelled at by one of the best quarterbacks ever. Kind of just didn't know what was going on. He didn't really have time to figure out what was going on, and he just kind of got thrust into a bad situation, and that's why we're here at wide receiver 51 after being the 102 last year. And you see T. Higgins right behind him. That's exactly why I'm not drafting T. Higgins right now, because of something like that. If T. Higgins is 52 right now and he splits time with Alden Tate and John Ross, do you think there's any way he rises from 52? Probably not. So the reason I was advocating for drafting Josh Jacobs over N'Keal last year is because I thought that you could get him cheaper this year. And now we're here. So N'Keal Harry is incredibly cheap. Julian Edelman's 34 going on 35. Outside of that, we're talking about Jacoby Myers. We're talking about Mohamed Sanu, who's also in his 30s. It's just N'Keal Harry going forward. He's the future for that wide receiver core, and especially if Cam gets another contract. I mean, people swear that Cam can't elevate a wide receiver, but after you saw him do it with Devin Funchess and you saw it do it with Kelvin Benjamin, I don't know what else you want from him other than elevating huge wide receivers that don't separate. Nikhil Harry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Next, we have Henry Ruggs, and he's wide receiver 40 right now. This is another player I acquired with the 2021 first. Talked about it with you prior to the show.
Yep.
In just about every year, he's a top 12 pick. This draft class happens to be so deep, especially running backs. Like maybe other years, there's not so many running backs that are saturating the first round, and we actually see more quarterbacks and wide receivers. But anytime that you have 5 running backs, even 6 running backs that are primed for work right now, they're going to be first round picks, maybe sometimes even if they don't deserve it. So that pushes guys like Henry Ruggs back, Michael Pittman back, Denzel Mims back, could all be first round picks in other years, even T. Higgins. But like I said, you could probably get him cheaper next year. Henry Ruggs is a guy who has no reason not to produce right now. He went into the exact situation that he needed to go in the West Coast offense, the quick slants, get the ball in his hand type deal. So at wide receiver 40, you would say it seems kind of rich. I mean, he's right behind Jarvis Landry, and you usually like to take Jarvis Landry there, but I don't think so. I mean, you're getting 6 years with Henry Ruggs, and you should get early production. So I'm not saying he's going to break through the ceiling in year 1, but he's certainly worth a 2021 first, especially since if that first can end up late, I mean, you got a huge deal. Henry Ruggs might be, 108, 107 in next year's draft.
Entirely possible. I think so. I mean, we'll just have to see, because I do have some concerns like regarding John Gruden as a play caller, but we'll see if they actually wind up like using Ruggs like to his strengths. And I mean, of course, I'm assuming it's all for nothing. I mean, the injury scare that happened was at about almost a month ago now. I'm assuming we'll get more word on that and clarification. It didn't sound like it was anything at the time. So I'm assuming we'll find out more like here within the next couple of weeks as training camp, or we're assuming training camp is about to start. So we'll know more like here shortly.
We'll see.
Yeah. So at least, so moving over to quarterbacks, a couple of guys that I'm interested in, at least one, I guess, has just had like his, like, I guess, first down year in a little bit. And that is Jared Goff, like down here at QB 16. So he's like around guys like Matthew Stafford, which I kind of understand, still behind like Aaron Rodgers, which to be quite honest, I don't understand. And then ahead of like Drew Lock, like Cam Newton, Drew Brees. I mean, okay, so I understand that. But at least for Jared Goff in particular, I think the part of the issue is that, I mean, last season was just an absolute train wreck. And as we saw their offensive line start to deteriorate, you started to see, I guess, the old Jared Goff. I mean, the Jared Goff, like when Jeff Fisher was in charge, and that was a lot of what like drove a lot of folks away. At least in my mind, though, I do see at least the potential for some positive TD regression, like in his future, because at least over the past like 2 seasons with not with Sean Payton, with Sean McVay as the head coach, like Jared Goff had comfortably sat at like a 5.5, 5.7% like touchdown rate, and he still had like the similar number of pass attempts like over the past couple of seasons. And now I understand that they got rid of Brandon Cooks, but they still have like multiple capable pass catchers: Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett, Robert Woods. I mean, and then also, I mean, we're assuming that either Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson or like some combination of those guys, including Malcolm Brown, like pick up the slack as well. Last year, Jared Goff's like touchdown rate was down to about 3.7, which is well below the average of about 4.5, 4.7. So if he moves back into something that's even closer to the mean, I mean, his numbers actually then they move from mid-range like QB2 into back-end QB1 numbers. And for me, the way that the Rams actually typically tend to operate, which is above league average at neutral passing rate, to me, that still signifies the fact that there's still plenty of volume for Goff in order to recoup some of that value. So I still see some, I guess, some semblance of optimism or a reason for optimism like behind Jared Goff. It's not like he's that old either. I mean, how old is Jared Goff?
25.
Yeah. I mean, still plenty of football left in his career. And if Sean McVay is like any, I guess, assessor of talent, I mean, he should know that, I mean, that they should start building again around Jared Goff with a stronger offensive line. And they can do that in this year's upcoming class. And from what I'm seeing, there's plenty of guards and tackles available in the 2021 class. So I'm thinking that there's going to be plenty of reason for moving forward for us to be optimistic about Jared Goff. And also the other guy that's actually fallen like even farther behind him at QB 22, according to DLF's ADP, is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, with Jimmy G, it's a little bit different because San Francisco, they actually had one of the worst neutral passing rates in the league. It was somewhere down with Baltimore. But at least with Lamar Jackson, we knew that Lamar Jackson could make it up with his legs. With Jimmy G, it's not so much. And also, I can totally understand with Debo's injury. We got Ayuk coming in as a rookie. I mean, there's not a ton behind him or around him, rather, in order to actually start helping him move the ball down the field. It's really just George Kittle and a couple other folks. I mean, Richie James, what's up? But I do think that when it came to those negative game scripts, like remember the game when they played against New Orleans? I mean, and they were, how many points were scored in that game? Like 80 something. I mean, that was one of those games where Jimmy G was actually pulled into like heavy passing volume, and that's where he shines. And I do think that after this past season, it's going to be more of those negative game scripts, like not necessarily like those complete jailbreak situations, like when they played against New Orleans, but a lot of folks will be able to test some of that defense, especially now with the fact that they lost DeForest Buckner to Indianapolis. That defensive front is not as strong as it was beforehand. Richard Sherman is another year older. So it's entirely possible that, I mean, especially considering they're going to be playing against other potent offenses, Arizona, Seattle, LA, I mean, twice a season, that there's at least some semblance or at least a potential for guys like Jimmy G to be pulled in, that they won't be controlling the clock, having guys like Raheem Mostert like rushing the ball 20, 30 times in a single game. They will need some actual passing volume from Jimmy G in the future. So for right now, I mean, both of those guys, I mean, I know for a fact that I would say that for Jared Goff, you're probably going to you can buy both of them on the cheap. I mean, based off of their ADP right now. I mean, ADP of like QB 16 for Jared Goff, QB 22 for Jimmy G. It won't be that hard to move for either of them, and especially with the incoming class. I mean, now being the new hotness with your Tuas, your Burrows, and all that. A lot of those vets that have had a down season this past year, or didn't have those high passing volume seasons that people want. I think a lot of those guys would be left by the wayside, such that you can move for them fairly easily. So at least for quarterbacks, I mean, those are two that I'm looking at right now. Where are you at for tight end?
Yeah, if you want to share the screen real quick, this is actually a super interesting graphic I wanted to share. So my two were TJ Hockenson versus Noah Fant. Isn't it crazy that they've passed each other 6 times?
That's wild.
So this is a cool little graphic over here at DLF, the Dynasty ADP comparison tool. I just brought up these two guys because this happens quite a bit in Dynasty, and you see that it is coming back up, their ADP, but they both had peaks, 78, 80 for Noah Fant. So they're two players that one came on very end of last season, right? Noah Fant showed that with Drew Lock, he was going to be a primary asset in that offense. However, the drafting of Jerry Jeudy, you've got Deshaun Hamilton there playing the slot. You've also got KJ Hamler now. So by drafting those wide receivers, and of course, Cortland Sutton's still there as a red zone threat. So by drafting those guys, I mean, you kind of scared people off. So I'm going to be surprised if this ADP holds, actually. I think he's going to be it's almost like a preemptive strike I'm trying to send out right now, because I think it's going to go down to like 100, probably later than 100. We might be talking about like a 7th, 8th, 9th round ADP. So this is a guy you can buy in on, and it's going to be cheaper and cheaper until we get to the season and see, wow, he's still going to be a feature part of that offense. I think that Drew Lock is really going to have to continue to rely on Noah Fant. That big athletic target in the middle of the field who creates separation is going to be a huge deal for Drew Lock, considering I don't think that he's going to be the tide that raises all ships. I don't think that he can be the syrup over the pancakes. I really don't. So you see all those people are going to suffer in that offense, but I don't think that Drew Lock can afford for Noah Fant to suffer, to be quite honest with you. I think that we might get a slow start from Jerry Jeudy. Cortland Sutton will probably ball out. And I really think that KJ Hamler's involvement is going to be minuscule. One of the type of players that's better for the real NFL than he is for our fantasy team. So, yes, they did draft pass catchers. I get that. But that does not automatically mean, like we talk about all the time with Peter, vacated targets, they work the same way when new players come in.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just automatically get sucked away from Noah Fant. He earned those last year. So he's going to continue to earn those. And then the other player is TJ Hawkinson. He suffered injuries himself, his ankle, I believe, last season. So it was a little bit of a rocky start after a huge first game. What was it, like 16 catches in his first game or something crazy like that. And then it fell off, the injury. But Matthew Stafford was fantastic in the games that he played last year. And then he got hurt, missed the season. We learned about David Blau. Downhill from there. So he's at another big discount at 90 overall, and especially in tight end premium. He's somebody that you could acquire as your tight end 2 that could end up being your tight end 1 for the next – he's 23, so 7-8 years if you wanted him to. So – you think about acquiring these players right now, you don't feel super great, and you're probably acquiring them as your tight end 2, tight end 3, but they're both players that you could foreseeably, be the next Gronks, the next Kelsey. I mean, these players are in the league now, and they have to come from somewhere. And my next honorable mention, I'll add a third just because I think Eric Ebron is so incredibly cheap. He's only 27 years old, which is so surprising. It seems like he's been in the league forever, but only 27. He's going to the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger, healthy. They need targets. And Vance McDonald has just proven that he's never going to be a receiving option in Pittsburgh. I mean,
he's not a consistent one.
No, people have been excited. Year after year, they get excited for Vance McDonald. I mean, Jesse James was there. They still were excited for Vance McDonald. It was just Vance last year. So excited. Nothing out of it. I just wouldn't worry about him at all. And that's probably why Eric Ebron has an ADP of something like 27. So in tight premium, when you can send a third round rookie pick for someone like Eric Ebron, stash him as your tight end 4, tight end 5, and just see what happens. I mean, I could honestly see him finishing in the top 12, top 15. Even a top 20 finish would be incredibly impressive for you on cost. So, he's definitely a dart that I'm willing to throw.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think definitely if not for the 2020 season, I would definitely think that they're easy stashes, like with some spot weeks that you can kind of like drop them into your lineup, so I'm assuming if you wind up grabbing one, like either one of them, you probably already have a starter, fairly like a decent starter, like already sitting on your squad. So, I mean, if you need to keep them and then just hold them for bye weeks or whatever other like possible injuries, then I think for 2020 and then for 2021 or moving forward, yeah, definitely. I would like to invest in either one of those guys as of right now. For me, the last position we'll cover is running backs, and 2 guys I'm looking at is like Darrell Henderson and Justice Hill. Now, Justice Hill, that's probably a personal preference thing because I was in on him I was in on him last season, and then of course like Mark Ingram, and then it was more for like on Gus Edwards' part than Mark Ingram that completely crushed his value. And then also like just Lamar Jackson himself being that actual more of a running back and taking a lot of those touches away from the running backs than anything else. But for Darrell Henderson, I mean, yeah, he was he was a 3rd round pick. They come back this season and they wind up taking Cam Akers towards the back end of the 2nd round. I mean, you can say Cam Akers is a 2nd round pick and Darrell Henderson was a 3rd round pick, but the picks separating them, it's I think maybe I think it's 16 picks apart or something like that. It's not like it's a massive separation. Like Cam Akers was drafted at the head of the 2nd and Darrell Henderson was at the back end of the 3rd. It's more like half a round or something like that. But either way, we've already been seeing reports about McVay saying that it's going to be a committee. There's no guarantee, or there's really nothing that's been put out there saying that Cam Akers is going to completely take over. I get the narrative that because that offensive line is at least on the decline as of right now, Cam Akers was more involved in the passing game back in college. So we can see him getting more of those dump offs that Jared Goff will have to use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I get the narrative. But at the same time, I mean, Darrell Henderson still has the rushing capability and is also a fairly decent pass catcher himself. that he can still wind up like taking over like at least enough of that role to be useful. And if there's still an equal opportunity share for at least the two of them plus Malcolm Brown in that offense in 2020,
And
I think
and John Kelly.
And John Kelly. I mean, if there's enough opportunity there for all of them, and as of right now, like Henderson, so his ADP right now is at 147. I mean, I wouldn't mind at least trying to see like where his value like winds up, like where he like what his opportunity share winds up in that offense, like in 2020 and moving forward. I mean, he's still on contract for he's got 2 more years left, like on his rookie deal. So at least for right now, I mean, for what he's going for and what it would cost in order to acquire him, I don't think that would put you to like you wouldn't be put out like trying to move for him at all. And like the same thing with Justice Hill. Now I know that Mark Ingram's at least there for 2020. I don't see him being there past this season. Gus Edwards is only signed through 2020 on a fairly small deal. It's possible they bring him back on another cheap deal as well, but at least for right now, I'm assuming he's also going to be gone. They're left with J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. I wouldn't mind.
Fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, that would be fantastic. And for right now, I mean, he's going like multiple rounds later than pretty much any other running back that you would consider. And with the upside and being attached to an offense like Baltimore, I wouldn't mind getting a piece of that, especially on the cheap as a throw-in. While you're most likely going to have to hold him and just stash him, like he'd be like a taxi squad candidate for 2020. I mean, I would at least try and see like how the contract situations in Baltimore fare out, and then once we get into the 2020, like the off season before the 2021 season, I wouldn't mind seeing like where Justice Hill shakes out and all of that, because he's the only one that's really guaranteed a future as of right now.
The Ravens would be fairly smart to have Justice Hill and J.K. Dobbins to bolster that backfield and use both of them at the same time, which they've been shown to do. I laugh because that Cam Akers narrative is so hilarious to me, that because his line sucked in college, that he's going to be better at running with a sucky line in the NFL, as if Cam Akers is just going to the gym, practicing running behind sucky offensive lines. Like, man, there's no way to get better at running behind bad offensive lines. No running back wants to be behind a bad. It's not like it's just like, yes, they drafted me with a bad offensive line. I'm really good at that. It's hilarious. And I'm not in on Darrell Henderson at all, but honestly, if you acquire him right now and he's involved whatsoever, even if he gives 45% of the touches, you hit a home run at ADP. So in terms of value, that's what Dynasty is all about to me, is the value. And you are exploiting a market if you take Darrell Henderson and he gets 45% of the running back touches. And if you think that that's possible, that's worth the price for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm trying not to of course we have to attach names and talk about their situations, but it's really about the possible value based off of their ADP right now. Right. And so I know the mantra, like, don't hate players, like hate their ADPs. Like at this point, like I'm not really in love with the player Darrell Henderson, but I definitely love his ADP. So I wouldn't mind investing in him, like where he sits at right now.
Yeah, and it's very unlikely that Cam Akers gets a workhorse role in 2020. I mean, I think he could, but it's very unlikely. So you're probably right. Probably should be buying Darrell Henderson. Honestly, you can't really project Cam Akers for 65% in year one, I don't think.
No, I mean, I don't think, because they didn't draft Akers with it. It's not like they drafted him the same way that they drafted Todd Gurley. And I don't think anybody would compare like Akers to Gurley when Gurley was coming out of college. So it's just, unless we could look at Akers like collegiate profile and say that, yep, that's definitely a workhorse running back. They drafted him with enough capital to say that he is going to wind up being a workhorse running back. So goodbye to Kelly, goodbye to Hendo, goodbye to Malcolm Brown. I mean, nobody said that. Like, that was not a part of the narrative after they drafted him. He was always going to be a part of this committee. And now, I mean, with McVay essentially saying that it's going to be a committee, now it's like, well, now we really should be focusing on, well, how much value can we get out of the other pieces that are definitely going to be a part of that offense in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
But those are our buys. I mean, those are the guys that we're looking at. I mean, obviously, like we kind of just walked through like our process for finding some of the value based off of the ADP and using some of the tools here at DLF. But we want to know like where you guys are looking, like what players you guys are seeing dip in value that you would want to take advantage of and shoot out some offers for. I know, especially at some point during the offseason, I know Sterling Shepard was like fairly low in value. And I know like our good buddy John Bosch was like sending out offers left and right. I think he acquired Sterling Shepard in multiple leagues for just a 3rd-round pick.
Wow.
Yeah, which is kind of wild to me. Like I know a lot of folks are like they're up on Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram being healthy. So, I mean, so on and so forth. But being able to get again a decent part of a high passing volume offense for a 3rd-round pick, that's value there. Yeah. I mean, that's all about trying to acquire value, like for the touches that you can project out for that player.
Yep.
So let us know where you're at. I mean, what buys like you're trying to acquire right now. What deals you might have acquired, like for some buy targets that you might have. Definitely like drop us a comment. Let us know like where you're at, and we'd love to hear more about it. So let us know. Final topic for tonight. We actually got a trade from one of our listeners, and so this is a multi-trade. Like we're evaluating like a few trades that he's got because he's looking at trying to move Lamar Jackson for an RB1. So the first trade was Lamar Jackson and Melvin Gordon for Deshaun Watson and Joe Mixon. Another trade was Lamar Jackson and Melvin Gordon for Kyler Murray and Miles Sanders. And then the final trade was Lamar Jackson for Dak Prescott and Kenyon Drake.
Mm-hmm.
What's your read on the situation?
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick because we are running close on time. So I don't know why he's really trying to acquire RB1 when he already has Melvin Gordon, if he's talking about in the near term. If he's talking long term, yeah, I guess. But my problem here is that if you're going to flip-flop players, Lamar Jackson, Melvin Gordon for Watson and Mixon, I'll go there first. I think Watson's in a significantly worse situation than Lamar Jackson. Granted, fantastic quarterback, and we don't know Mixon's situation with the Bengals. He's due for another contract, and apparently he's not playing until he gets one. So you're talking about a player who just got his second contract versus a player who needs his second contract, and we don't know where it will be. At least with Melvin Gordon, you know where his second contract came from. He's with the Broncos. Believe it's a 3-year deal. Whatever. I don't really like running backs on their second contract, period, anyways. So I just feel like you're losing a lot there with an ADP. Sure, Melvin Gordon is a significantly less value than Mixon. However, situation-wise, say Mixon doesn't get his contract, sits out a year. Okay, he didn't help you in 2020, and then he goes to a team that's in an even worse situation than the Broncos that you have no control over, and now you essentially just flip Lamar Jackson for Watson. So I don't agree with doing that. Same situation here with Lamar Jackson and Melvin Gordon for Kyler and Sanders. I don't really get the flip-flop because Lamar Jackson, even as much as I like Kyler, is just going to be significantly better than Kyler for as many years as Kyler played. And then Melvin Gordon for Sanders, I get that. I get that a lot. People love Sanders right now. But the fact that people love Sanders right now means his value is probably not going to go up too terribly much, especially if he doesn't get an entire workload that we thought that he was going to get. If he's not a bell cow and we're seeing too much Boston Scott, he's already so high in value. He's either going to stay or go down. So
he's at the RB7. I mean,
already RB7.
Yeah. Where's like, how does he move up? I mean,
so and if he's already at his peak, why are you doing this? Because again, then you just flip Lamar Jackson for Kyler. Sanders gets 65%, and everybody's upset. Okay, now he draws closer to Melvin Gordon, so that's another one. I get the premise in both of them, but I see no point. Now, this last one, I start to see a point because you're gaining a starter, you're gaining someone who's going to be a fantastic sell in 2020, and you're gaining someone who, in all likelihood, will end up being an RB1. So the drop from Lamar Jackson to Dak is not too terribly significant. We're talking about my quarterback 1, most quarterback 2s for the quarterback 4, quarterback 3. So adding Drake in there where I don't feel great, now I'm starting to understand because you added a player and Dak's going to be close to 2 points, less than 2 points in behind on a per game basis from Lamar Jackson. Now I can see that because you're adding 16, 15 points per game with Drake, assuming that you didn't have another running back to produce those numbers. You still keep improvement. room for improvement and an excellent sell candidate. I mean, if he's a top five running back midseason, which I think he can be, you're going to make a hefty profit on him, still be happy that you have Dak, and okay, now that trade made a lot of sense. So I lean the last one if I have to do it. I'd probably rather get a better piece than Drake there, but I like buying Dak, and I think that Drake will net a pretty big profit in 2020.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think out of all of them, you're already looking at running backs that are already like pretty much at their peak. I mean, Joe Mixon RB6, Miles Sanders RB7, and so trying to project them to move up even past their current ADP. So that's where you're talking about Kamara, you're talking about Zeke, and I mean that's top end of their range of outcomes, and it's hard for me to see that happening as of right now. So at this point, yeah, your best bet will probably be looking at that LJ Dak deal, because at least with Dak, you know that it's not like a massive drop off at quarterback. And then at Kenyon Drake, like right now, sitting at about like QB 16 according to ADP. I mean, there's definitely room for him to ascend. And if he does wind up hitting that, which I mean, being a part of the Cardinals, that's definitely possible. And the way that he played towards like over the half that he was in Arizona last season, definitely well within his range of outcomes. I mean, there's at least I see a path to potentially profiting off of that deal. The others, at best, you're probably breaking even.
Yep.
So last one real quick, since we got a question like from the chat. So Sutton or Boyd in a half-point PPR 1 QB league. I lean Sutton here.
Sutton by a lot for me.
Yeah, I think it's Sutton like fairly easily. I mean, again, I know that not a lot of folks are hyped on Drew Lock, but still Sutton received, I want to say like off the top of my head, 22% like market share within that offense.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that they added Judy and like we talked about Judy, talked about Fant, Hamler, Melvin Gordon, so on and so forth. But I mean, Sutton's still the alpha, like on that, like in that team for 2020. We'll see what happens as Judy starts to make his moves and like better and get acclimated to the NFL. But as of right now, it's Sutton, like without too much question.
Same.
Yep. So, all right. So that's all we got for tonight, folks. Again, we appreciate everybody stopping out. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to come and find us like at the link. Drop a comment. Come hit us up at our Twitter handles at Chris Allen FFWX, at APWILDE. Come yell at us. Come tell us why we're wrong. Be kind when you do it. Or just have more questions for us. Shoot us more questions if you possibly have them. Other than that, Adam, we got anything else?
Nah, I tried to pull up Sutton's market share. I don't have it up in time, but it was pretty significant. That's it for me. Peace.
All right, guys. Everybody be safe. Wash your hands, wear your mask. I'm glad to see some sports going on tonight. So it looks like we might be, getting back towards to something normal.
Wait to lose my money.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting back into like the DFS world now. Hopefully we'll hear some more about training camp, and we'll be talking about that on the Mailbag Show over the next couple of weeks as we start to get some more actual news about the teams. But with that, everybody stay safe. Y'all be safe. We'll talk to y'all next week.
Peace.